Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. I am the CEO of Leadershipity, a serial entrepreneur, a Bloom growth coach. I've been coaching my whole life. Just wrote a book called Leading Winning Teams with Wiley, and I have spoken over 17 countries, but most people know me because I spent over 13 years in professional baseball coaching in 3 World Series. And today on the Winners Find a Way show, I have Wisconsin's own Mark Burwell. What's up, Mark? How are you, buddy?
Good to be with you.
Man, it is fun. We are gonna take. I got a Packer backer on today. He's pumped up about his Packers and longtime guy involved there. And man, you've lived all over the state of Wisconsin though, but you're in the Green Bay area now.
I'm in De Pere, Wisconsin, which is right outside Green Bay, and looking forward to the draft coming up as well.
Yeah, big time. That's going to be a big time kind of deal right there. We got lots going on with the draft, which is going to be it's going to be a big show in Green Bay after 800,000 cruised into Detroit last year. I'm expecting more of the same in Green Bay for a big live audience. So should be a lot of fun. We're planning some fun things up in Green Bay, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. If you want to catch the Winners Find a Way group, Mark Burwell, some of the groups that are out there, it's going to be a super good time. I expect Alumni Direct's going to be involved and a lot of good fun up in Green Bay area for the draft. So check that out. That's coming soon. Draft is in May, right, Mark?
It's actually 23rd of April for a few days there. Thursday, Friday,
23rd
Saturday.
of April. All right. Well, so you're going to call in the warm weather for Green Bay by April, right? Like, is that
No,
going to happen?
we're going to have almost 60-degree weather up here in the middle of, or almost Groundhog Day here. But you never know in Wisconsin; it can change.
Yeah, in a second, right? In a second. So super excited, like to talk a little bit about you. I mean, you met your wife a long time ago. Man, you're an exec, met her out on the softball field. You've been around ball a long time and passion for that. You live in the Green Bay area, the Madison area. You've got your lake property up in Lake Arrowhead, which is an incredible area. You have 2 boys who now have 4 grandkids between them. And they've gone on to the executive life after a long stint for yourself in the executive life and building up business. You've been a development guy from the word go. Started as a college, all-state runner in high school, and then an all-American at Wisconsin Stout in the NAIA. And back then, like you said, the NAIA and the NCAA were kind of equal footing back then. They were trying to figure out what kind of conferences, where people would go. And it really hadn't been well established yet as far as NAIA actually had been pretty well established. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the NCAA was still young and up and coming. So change there, but you've been retail, men's clothier, catalogs. I mean, you've built up brands across states. Then you move into the entrepreneurial world with the Urban Hope entrepreneur group and eHub, often called, and developed more entrepreneurial centers across the Midwest, all sorts, like kind of licensing that content that you guys developed there out of the eHub to numbers of places. Is that accurate?
Yes, I think you've kind of capsulized it.
Yeah. I mean, always going fast, always moving quick. Is that from your athletic days? Is that from your training, being an athlete, training yourself, understanding the discipline that it takes to kind of move forward and what's required? Because you've carved out this area of really understanding how to develop people, business architecture. You've written 5 books. I mean, you know how to set up and develop how to write a book and then how to bring that information to somebody. Is that something that you developed early, you just had a knack for, or you developed?
Well, I think it happened to have a single mom, lived on the poor side of Madison, and grew up. She married a kind of my role model, even though my real father was really an athlete as well, an all-state basketball player. He was a great baseball player, inducted into the Hall of Fame in Madison, more as an advocate for bringing that together. But when you're small, you tend to step back, and the Milwaukee Braves was real big back then. So you kind of held that ball, and I'd be throwing the ball up against the back of the schoolhouse, thinking I was in the World Series, this, that. So as a little leaguer, love baseball, but you're the fastest kid in Madison. So what do? When school comes, it was track. It was,
Yeah.
and then of course a little football, but it was more or less baseball in the summertime and track during that season. But I think by doing that, when I moved to the west side of Madison, it gave me an opportunity. My peer-to-peer was that identity, because when you move to another high school, you tend to have a lot of peer pressure. And I developed and pushed through that because of my being on the track team. And it was Madison was great. We had Stu Voigt, who is a nationally known shot putter. We had, we were a leader for those 2 or 3 years, powerhouse in track and field. So that gave me an opportunity. And with that, went on and went in the service for a stint, but then back up to UW, went to UW Stout. And my freshman year was a conference championship there. And I realized that this program really doesn't have a program. But I felt that let's take it to the next level, because that was my background. I had been on a state leadership team in track and field. So I tried to bring some of that in. And so I was the captain, MVP for the years there. And we went on to become conference champions, which when you have only 18 people on your team, and lacrosse and Oshkosh, some of the other teams had 60, because the track team, you need to have the jumpers and the sprinters and the long distance runners. So with that, my whole key was to bring all those connections together, like I saw happen at Madison West. So that really gave me that opportunity.
How did, now you kind of zeroed in on the 400 in college, right? Quarter mile.
Yes.
I mean, how tall are you, Mark? How tall are you at your peak?
How tall?
Yeah.
You're talking about 5'10"?
Yeah, is that how tall you are? 5'10"?
5'10".
Yeah, because the quarter milers now are all like 6'4", right?
Yes.
They have these massive gaits, right? They have
Yes.
they are just absolute antelopes, right? They are long, lean. And so 5'10", you're a 400 guy. Like were you one of the taller runners at that time?
I would say in junior high and younger, yes, I played basketball a little bit, but I was probably medium tall, but then stopped. But that sprinter part of me was there. I looked like a sprinter, but when I got into training and was looking at a lot of aspirations into bigger things, that was what I went on is my gait, that and the backstretch. In other words, when you're running a quarter mile and your time is 48 seconds, and by the way, that was yards. The NAIA and 1972 was the Olympic year. Everything went to meters, and that's when they changed over to meters. So all the records I had kind of got dissipated. But there's still one on the board. It's the oldest record in the field house up there. It is in the indoor or outdoor quarter mile. So you in the 600 time, I probably would have placed in the Big Ten. But because you have that opportunity when you go to different meets, you're obviously against bigger schools and stuff. But do
they run the 600 anymore?
They really don't. The 300.
I don't hear it anymore
because they had a lot of different types of tracks, indoor tracks. Now they're all 220 or 200 meters, so it's equal. But the 176 was usually what it was. So you had a lot of different records that were there, and so they kind of got pushed to the side. But it was good to see, because I think I like to see records broken.
Yeah.
But when they changed the playing field or the record board, in baseball, a lot of that happens. The bats get
Yeah.
different, the balls get different. So
Yeah. There's a lot of variables, right, in records.
exactly,
And
exactly.
and track is no different, right? You have wind dated now. Everyone takes the wind dated time, right? Because they're
Yes,
worried about getting any extra help in a sprint or something like that, right? And of course, they don't do that in the long runs, which is crazy. But let's talk a little bit about you leave college. Yeah, I mean, at a pretty young age, you're a corporate executive pretty quickly. Um, how do you think? Do you think they recognize some of those leadership skills from your athletic development, from the training and the discipline that it was taking? I mean, everyone knows runners have a different level of pain tolerance, right?
sure,
Because you got to get to that point where lactic acid's filled your body and you got to keep
right,
moving, right? And
exactly.
most people, it's only logical to stop. Runners just don't understand the logic, right? So there's a finish line and I'm not there yet. That's all they know. So do you think that was a key element to you very quickly rapidly ascending in leadership in a really good corporation?
Well, I think when you're working back then, even in high school, as what I transferred on to my boys is you want to get into not the same job. And I remember even telling Reggie and Sarah, wait, with their kids, they couldn't understand. Well, Mark, should they go to different jobs? Shouldn't they stay at the same job? He said, no, absolutely not. I said, try to get them into customer service somehow, try to get them into manufacturing or skilled labor somehow. And,
Sales.
different sales, yes, different, try to
Yeah.
do something different. And that'll make a huge difference. And I think I was fortunate enough when I lived on the east side of Madison. One of the guys who used to throw the football around with us was Pat Richter. Pat Richter was a great athletic director of Madison, but played all sports, played in the pros, baseball, football. I mean, he was great. And he was Oscar Mayer's personnel director. So he's the one who recruited me right out of college. Well, I'm sure his mind was, I'm looking at athletes. So
Yeah.
I took the job. 2 weeks later, I had somebody who I had worked in a summer and throughout the year job in distribution, traffic and distribution logistics, said, this Prangies company is looking for somebody to help put up a corporate distribution center. We want to tab you as helping run that. And I thought, wow, it's a regional center. It was developing stores. So I had to call up Pat and say, I'm moving out of Minneapolis and I'm going to be moving back to Madison. And which that was great because Prangies decided to put a regional distribution center there. So with that, they recognized, I think, and it gave me an opportunity to, wow, now I got to move up to the next level. And
Yeah.
I accepted that. And I think I was the youngest really in some of the store management positions as I grew through that. And actually was on a plane quite a bit with Prangies to help set up their stores from Traverse City, Michigan, Marinette, just a lot throughout the whole state. And I just got a hunger for all the aspects of retailing. I never really worked in the store, but I was in operations. And at that time, a lot was going on in retail. And, but then that culture changes. And so that gave me an opportunity when I got into entrepreneurship to see all that. That was truly my background with that. And I would have never been able to grow and become a CEO of growing that company if it wouldn't have been for a lot of those people that they had hired that were key leadership positions. And I went right along with it. And they had a great training program.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. One is, let's talk about all this transition from athletics and how that helped and served you in this corporate world, because a couple things really come to mind. One is the adapting from, oh, I'm a high school all-state athlete, to going to a college where I'm an all-American, and now dealing with only the 12 best athletes in the state get to go to college for the scholarship. Not everybody, right? Like, and now
Correct.
it's a very elite few. So it's doing another job at another level and what that takes at that level. And then, of course, the recruiting of an athlete means I've got coachability. I can train Mark up. He's already had to learn a bunch of things to compete at that next level. So he's not afraid of learning. He's not afraid of adapting to do something different to continue to compete. Is that what you found from that transition from athletics?
I felt that everybody has, there's dreamers out there, but everybody coming from not a wealthy family, but having the opportunities. Opportunities is a big word. But I needed to find solutions for motivating people like I did in the track team to win the conference championship. And we were recognized 2 years ago on the 50-yard line for that. It was a huge accomplishment with that small amount of people. But I needed to find the recipe for success. And some of that was, I felt the key words, empowerment was one of them, commitment. Obviously, perseverance is a key one. So with all these, I looked at that when I did not look at it as setting up a corporate world as a corporate. I took each store as if it was their ownership.
Yeah.
In other words, each store, they almost like an ESAP. And mentoring those individuals, and then they would mentor from there. So no commissions, treat it like your own business. And I always believed in entrepreneurship, and really that's the way the business was run. And so it was a lot of learning how to scale up a business is what I transferred into when I started coming back to really put a program together for the Green Bay area when they tapped me to build that program. It was all about putting all the people together to build an ecosystem. And I had been involved with that ecosystem because I was a disruptor. When I went into the menswear field, and especially some of the specialty sizes, the big and tall, we worked with the Packer players. We were a major sponsor. I go statewide. I worked a lot with the Packer office and the Bucks and the Brewers as well. So when you do that, you have to somehow, what is it going to be the special thing? And I found the second most important thing, and that is giving back. And that giving back meant in every store, maybe there was, each manager had a theme. In Madison, the Empty Stocking Club. Green Bay, it might have been United Cerebral Palsy. Everybody had something. And a lot of the players, Max McGee had juvenile diabetes in the Appleton store. So we had a jersey, or we had something where we teamed up. And a lot of the players, we didn't work necessarily with their agents. We worked with them as wanting to give back like we wanted to do as an organization. You there?
Hey, Mark, I just lost my audio. Sorry about that. And I don't know what exactly happened to my audio on that, but hold on. I'm just getting it back out here. See if I've got you there. Can I get you? Test me.
Gotcha.
Okay. Can you hear me, Mark?
I can hear you.
Okay, I've lost my audio on you here. Sorry about that. Audio. As I sit there and think about your book, Stepping Up to New Opportunities. I mean, this is, some of the framework you're talking about sounds like why that became such an impactful book for others that were, like you say, we're creating entrepreneurial environments. This is about growing and doing and working together, and you're individualizing stores for a much bigger firm, but each one has to take ownership and responsibility. So opportunities, which becomes a utilization across the board for all sorts of different places in your world. Is that fair?
Yes.
And so let's talk about that one. What is the stepping up? What is asked of that? Because, hey, here's new opportunities. What do I need to do to step up to that?
Well, I think looking at what happened throughout my journey, we'll say, is right after Reggie White passed, some of the things we had a big paradigm of coming together to empower communities, people and their communities through entrepreneurship. So I kind of coined, I think it was a week after his funeral, and that the power of 92. And I kind of use that a lot and name that obviously after his jersey and that. But the power of 92 meant a lot of things, and um, to dream. And I think a lot of the empowerment, reclaiming the fire, a lot of athletes sometimes fall through the cracks. A lot of people in business fall through the cracks. And when you're taking that journey, there's no detours. There's really no detours. I mean, the river flows down and you can't back it up, right? You got to
Yeah.
keep going. So I think of myself, some of those things about reclaiming the fire. A lot of people need to reclaim the fire. Michael Jordan had that. He was in basketball got burned out. So athletes can kind of do that too. Entrepreneurs can kind of do that too. So they have to evolve. They have to reinvent themselves. So what did he do? He went and played baseball. Not too good at that. Came back, played basketball. Went into golf. Didn't do too well with that. But the fact of the matter is, there's still that power. It's really, I think, what people have to do is grasp on and dare to be different. Look for their compass. And I think I had said at Rob's podcast about the compass part of it. In other words, you need to find your compass, because once you do that, there's going to be a lot easier on your journey, and you're going to find some beautiful destinies by doing that. And everybody has to have that dock to come back to, and that can be your family, it can be a business, it can be something to grasp onto. So I think that's really important. You got to really dare to dream, but at the same time still have some stability in your life.
Yeah, I think that as athletes, we do dream, right? We run around our yards all day when we're 10, 12 years old, dreaming of the last shot at, the NBA
Yes,
championships or
yes,
March Madness or bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, and here comes Clark to the plate. I mean, I don't know how many times I relive that in
yes,
wiffle ball, right? And this was a very interesting dynamic in my life, Mark. You'll appreciate is when I headed off to Cleveland, and I was 25 years old, and we're in the World Series, and I'm sitting in this dugout, and everyone always talks about, hey, live the dream, right? Well, all of a sudden I look up and I realize here's like 50 young men who all are actually getting a chance to live that dream of running around just 10, 15 years before that in their backyards, going, hey, one day I'm going to be in a World Series. I'm going to be playing for the championship, and this is what's going to matter in my life. And this is my purpose, and I am driven only towards that. Like I am dreaming, and every instance of my day is lined up towards what I have to do in that role. And when I'm not doing that role, I have an anchor foundation of a family of people I'm responsible for, of things I take care of, a home I go back to, a place I lay my head down. And there's that balance of that. But as you've talked about this, athletes are really good at creating vision. They see themselves operating in inside an organization. They see what it's going to take from them to be successful inside the purpose of the company, of the organization, of the team, and they're envisioning that all the time. So when you were working with people that necessarily weren't athletes, that you're coming up and they're getting into the e-hub and they're trying to learn, hey, how's this entrepreneurial thing work? One of the things that was really easy for me as an athlete to understand was all the sacrifices I had to make. I understood how many parties I missed. I understood the workouts that I had to go to instead of going to hang out with my buddies and go to the lake. There were things that you made. And one of the hard times we have sometimes in developing entrepreneurs in our world is that they think like, oh, well, get out of my warm bed at 11 o'clock on a Friday when there's, someone broke into the shop or something happened. Like that's not comfortable. That's not convenient, but you're the owner. You're the ultimately responsible. So you've got to do what you've got to do. And how do you teach that? How do you teach that to understand that?
Well, I think it's has a lot to do with becoming a role model. And then stepping back when people get to be 13, 14, of course, they know it all. And so you step back and you become a role model. But at the same time, what I learned in my athletic endeavors and what really shared with my boys, indirectly, directly, is not to talk to them. The coaches do that. Let them do that. Teachers, let them do that. Their supervisors at work. But what I did do is when we sat down at the dinner table, they're both runners, right? And I'd say, did you practice today? And both of them kind of looked at each other and said, yeah. And the other one said, maybe not so much. And I said, well, just remember when you get onto the track, if you didn't practice, somebody else did. So you have to make that sacrifice. And I just think of that. And my son later on, when we moved, he was a great basketball player, and the coaches were trying to get him in baseball and basketball, but he was a runner. It's kind of like myself. Your passion is for baseball, but you use your skills, your natural skills.
Yeah.
So when we moved into Oshkosh, Wisconsin, when he was going to be in high school and the other one was going to go to junior high, people would come over and all the basketball players, the summertime, they're knocking on the door. They got to bring out Sean to play basketball, and my wife would say, no, he's out running. So they'd come back. He's the new kid. They want to play basketball and kind of shoot some hoops and all that. No, he's out running. So finally, Kathy says, well, why don't you wait here and maybe you can, I'll have Sean go running with you guys. And they said, running? We're going to play basketball. Well, Sean got him running. They didn't have any cross country team at that school, basically hardly any. Well, what ended up happening, a lot of those guys who didn't make the varsity basketball team went into cross country. And they did pretty dang good and had a lot of state runners and went to state. So why those basketball players saw something from Sean meant you have to sacrifice a little bit. Basketball is different. And even now he's kind of coaching, even though he's an executive, he's doing the same thing I did. I coached at high school when they needed extra coaches, when the girls came on board. So he's been a great, giving back that way. And even my other son, who does a lot with community service, those are key things, I think, to become a role model for your kids. And then the role model for all the people, if you are a president or CEO or a manager, that's what they see. That's what they see. It's not do as I say, not as I do. No, it's you need to rephrase that a little bit or throw that out. So I think that's really important. People really evaluate, especially in today's world, they really look at that. And Trent, that a lot of the heroes and when you look at the athletes, it's not the ones that make a lot of money. I mean, that's where Reggie came in with free agency and different things. It's really about, do you want to play or not? And I remember Reggie McKenzie from the Packers general manager, he said, I had an easy job. Reggie's the one who recruited all the players to win that Super Bowl. And so you have to have a great sense of being an influencer. And I think that's the biggest quality within a leader is becoming that influencer.
Yeah, I love that. I often think about this. You said something very intriguing to me that caught my ear, because I know a lot of people have a passion for a sport and they love it. They may be a super fan, I'm 5'6", and my dad played college basketball, and that's awesome for him. I was not going to make it as a college basketball player. The game had changed significantly, and I was the youngest of the four. So the game had come along, and I enjoyed basketball, but I wasn't seeing the same success. I had to recognize where I was going to be successful at. If I continued in the basketball run, I would have been a nice high school player. That's great. There was no college future for a 5'6" guy, right? Like it just wasn't in the cards in that day. And so recognizing that, like, where are my skills suited that I will contribute the best, go the furthest. It's really important. And as I saw a lot of pro athletes and coached a lot of pro athletes, there's oftentimes guys like Darren Erstad, who could go pro in 2 or 3 different sports, right? He's a good hockey player. He's a good football player, great kicker at Nebraska, and punter, and yeah, he's got a major league baseball aspirations. So, but you realize, hey, like this is the skills that are probably best suited for me and give me the best opportunity for success, longevity. All these things are factored in to our decisions of where we should go. And I don't want to discount anybody's passions, but we are given God-given gifts, right? And I'm always asking people to follow those, like don't withhold those things, because having an awareness around that, it shines light on so many things because you have that, and it gives life to other people just being around you because you have those skills. And I see the current generation that's coming up. I feel like they don't understand that, Mark. I feel like they're like, oh well, yeah, I'm really good at that, but I don't like to do it that much. It's like, oh my gosh, like everyone admires this about you. Everyone, gets so excited about when you do these things, you draw or whatever it is that you're skilled with, and they like withhold it. It's weird to me. Have you found that?
There's definitely always changing generations,
Yeah.
and you see that with it kind of skips a generation, and when they say it always comes back, whether it's in the fashion world. When I'd be in New York and that, we not only talked about fashion, or in Montreal, not only about fashion, how it evolves all the time. You have to reinvent yourself. How can you think that far ahead? Well, you don't ask your customers what they want. You don't ask the athletes, if you're a coach or a captain of a team, you don't ask them that. You show them what they should be looking at. You better know that, or you're not going to be a good entrepreneur. So your gift, your value proposition there, whether it's an athlete, is a gift of seeing that vision in that. But I remember sponsoring a lot of the Packers shows, and I remember working with Forrest Gregg, and he came in when they had the shutdown in the NFL, and they were using, ex-players and that. And he came in, well, he tried to bring in the Lombardi principles a little bit. And sometimes that was more corporate, but he loved to hear some of my stories about working with entrepreneurs. So I would, before he started his Monday morning meetings, I would sit with him and we talk about what's going to be on the show. We talk about business. And we really found we had so many things together. And he said, so tell me a little bit about that, Mark. And I said, well, you need a quarterback, right? You need leaders and mentors. You need to know your competition. And some of these, it's in one of my chapters of the book. You need to be aware of the clock. You need to have preparation, involvement in the company, and trust the decision-making of the leader that you have. If you can't get those people to trust you, then your decision-making isn't going to be very good. So, and then I think the last thing is passion. But in my first book, I realized after sitting at my cottage and my wife, who had 4th stage cancer, realizing, passion is there, courage is there, a lot of stuff going on, but something, it's beyond the passion. So that's what I named my first book, was it's beyond the passion, because everybody says this about passion, but there's more things to it. And we could spend another 10 podcasts talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. No, it's so true. Right. I mean, I think, how do you start a fire without any ignition, right? You got to get it started. And so that passion is an igniter, and no fire starts without something to ignite it, right? But there's so much more to keeping it going. There's so much more into that. I love that part. As I've interviewed a lot of people who have talked about my book, and kind of similar to what you said earlier, like, hey, if there's somebody that's equal footing, and I remember a couple of Jim Ayers said this on a podcast, former president of Amway USA, and Jim was like, hey, if I have 2 equal footing folks who have a lot of the same background criteria, we like them the same out of the interview, I'm taking the one who was the captain on the team. I'm taking the one who's got that athletic background because I've got some intangibles there that I know I'm dealing with. They were made the captain because they model the behavior. They know what it's like to be under pressure. They understand that it's not about them and that there's more to the whole team than just themselves. And there's all these skill sets he just kind of rattles off that, hey, I get. And that doesn't mean the other person isn't highly qualified and skilled and all that. I just know what I'm getting from my athletic background. I know what the captain of the women's high school volleyball team is going to give me because I know what she had to go through to get there. What would you say to that for people that are out there hiring?
Well, I think we've been talking a lot about the Packers and things, but I remember Vince Lombardi always saying that you have to have heart power, right? And how can you? I think you can show younger generations, you can show almost any generation, heart power is important. It really has a lot to do with, are they engaged? And I remember the football coach at Madison West, Willis Jones, and I remember him saying one time to the going up and down the team, you know what? Do you want to be a participant or a spectator? Because if you're not on the field at that time, you're off the field. But are you still a spectator or you want to be a participant? So if you've got heart power, you're definitely going to be a participant. A lot of people, they complain. We just went through this big, huge election and everybody was complaining, pointing fingers, doing this, doing that. Well, they're the ones who are kind of, I looked at as if I was a coach or if I was a president of a company, is that are they spectators? Are they participants? Because if that's the case, talent wise, they're not prospects, they're suspects.
Yeah.
And that's important to anything in life. Are you going to sit on the sideline? And if you are sitting on the sideline and you're not ready to go in yet, you still better be a participant.
I love that.
Always be engaging, I guess, is what I'm trying to say to maybe answer that thought.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, like separating, the contenders from the pretenders, right?
Right.
And it's
Makers
not
and takers.
easy. It's not easy to know who's interested and who's committed, because I see a lot of people that are interested. I was in Panama years ago for the Global Leadership Conference with EO, and the president of Panama came and spoke to the group. And he was an enlightening guy. He owned a lot of the grocery stores in Panama, and so he had this massive food distribution. And it was a very interesting guy. He said, I didn't really see myself in politics, but I would complain all the time about politics in our country. I would sit at my club with my friends and I would say, hey, this is lousy and this is. And finally, my buddies were like, hey, listen, man, we're all kind of tired of hearing their broken record here. You want to go do something about it, then go ahead. But like otherwise, we've had enough, man. Like, you're a spectator complaining. And he's like, wow, they were exactly right. I had become a victim on the sidelines, complaining about all that was happening to me. And I've got to step in and take action. If I want it to be different, I'm going to have to do something different. And so he ran, he got into office and he got going and he wanted to change things for the better. And he ended up coming full circle and becoming the president of Panama, and all because he was a spectator and recognizing, you know what, I need to be a participant here and get in. So I love that analogy. I think that's really important because there's plenty to complain about, and there's no shorts of complaints anywhere, right? So I love the idea of doing something about it. Something that really stuck in about you, and I don't know if other people always get this, is that as a um, guy who's been regarded as a real strong developer, a big contributor, could be in some intimidation for folks who see you as this executive in big companies, and you're a caregiver. You have got a heart for giving to others. Came alongside your wife in a horrible bout with cancer that ultimately, bless her heart, took her life. And you walked through that and found like, hey, I have skills at this. This is something that is near and dear to me and important. And did you know that before your wife ever found ill, or did you discover this along the way?
I didn't discover it, but I'm just going to hold up a pen here. I just happen to have on my desk, and it's called The Daymaker. There's a book,
Yeah.
The Daymaker. And I remember a couple of my staff members, it was Friday afternoon. It was 1 o'clock or so. And they said, well, Mark, because I used to see people coming through the program, and sometimes they just come in and I just empower them. They just needed a little bit of, because people said, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so I would say to them, you know, just give them a little enlightening talk and that, and the both my staff members said, no, you haven't really helped anybody this week, or in other words, you haven't really helped anybody. When I say help anybody, I meant change their life. So they saw a lot of this happening through empowerment. And the Daymaker came when that specific person was my last appointment, and it dramatically changed her life. And so she sent me that book, and then she brought in the pen, and I realized at that time, and that was probably 15, 20 years ago. And I still sticks in my mind as I don't look at myself as a daymaker anymore as much as I look at myself as being a Sherpa. In other words, that was some of the challenges in my life where I had to take detours in that. And I'm realizing that a Sherpa, there's a million mentors. That word is overblown. But to be a Sherpa means that you have to not only know how to get up the mountain, but how to get down. And I realized that in my life is that I built this big company. How do I get back down now? When you're the one who's the face of that, you don't just say, okay, who's next? We're going to get somebody else. It doesn't work that way because you're the face of that. And I find the same thing now with the nonprofit. You have to be a Sherpa. You can take people up, but what they're really looking for is, how do I get back down? So people have been in business for 18, 20 years. They just think it constantly continues. And I say, no. So I felt now the last several years, my job has been showing some of those people how to get back down off the summit. They've got to the top. And in some cases, that even happened with athletes. They were pegged to be in a specific event. And I could see even coaching that they didn't belong in that event. They just happened to be in that event.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to bring them back down to start over. And then boom, they come back and they win the conference where they didn't before because they were pegged into that specific event. So those are just some lessons learned in life, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good lessons. Let's talk about winners find a way. I love the quote, winners, when shown data that they're losing, find a way to win. Tell us a time, Mark, where you were kind of in that mode, like, hey, listen, man, this is what I'm seeing. I'm envisioning this. We're going to be winners. I recall a time in my life where, we thought we were pretty good. We were playing a game, and I think we were down 40-4 at halftime, on a basketball game in like 7th or 8th grade. And I was like, wow, we are really losing. And our coach came in at halftime and said, hey, you're doing great. I love the hustle, and I love all your effort, and let's keep giving it all we got in the second half. And I was like, wait a minute, that's it? Like, we're down 36 points at halftime. Like, are we going to change to a 2-3 zone? We're going to go press. We're going to go do something different. But we didn't do anything different besides keep trying. And they scored another 40 points, and we scored another 40 or 4. And so we lost 80-8. And it was just like, oh my gosh, man, like, let's not ignore the data that we're getting killed here, right? So do you have a time where you were faced with a challenge in your life, and certainly there was clear indications that you were not winning, you're in a losing situation, and you must do something different? Walk us through that.
Well, I think at my age, you've gone through recessions, you've gone through COVID, you've gone through a lot of different economic things as well
Yeah.
as other things. And so I always like to, I remember when COVID, everybody thought they should just shut down their businesses. And so I tried to call as many people. They needed help on how to get the SBA loans and different things. Some of them I could tell just figured, oh, I was going to be vacation for whatever. And I spent more time calling them, or they would call me, or on the emails, and I'd say, you need to starve your fear, feed your faith. I said,
Mm.
just put those two things down. And then the next thing I learned, because during that recessionary period in 2009, I happened to get a call from the Hmong Association in Wisconsin to speak at a statewide conference. And they wanted the topic they wanted me to speak on for the small and businesses not was expansion. Expansion.
Yeah.
So when I got in there, here it is. They're all just, right there listening. And so my talk had to be, and I think preparing that speech and handing out one of my books at that time was exactly that, is to get going. Everybody else has stopped. And it reminded me of that, what I just referred to with my boys sitting at the dinner table and saying, remember now, if you didn't go out and run, somebody else. It's that story about the gazelle and the lion.
Yeah.
The lion's got to get up to eat, and the gazelle's got to get away from the lion.
Yeah.
So I always think of those type of analogies, and it's really detours, right? We all have detours and challenges to that, but it's a process. Life is a process, and you have to go in that. There's going to be transitional periods. I've gone through a couple transitional periods, and you got to reboot yourself, reset yourself, and pause.
Yeah. I love that. I've never seen, we always draw the line like, oh, I went from here to here, and it's a hockey stick growth, right? And
Right.
I've never actually seen a straight line to growth. What's happened is it's here and then knock back down, and then here and then knock back down, and then we had to figure that out. And then we had to go down. I'm like, it looks like a bad EKG is what it looks like. Like
Right.
there's all sorts of ups and downs in this path. And the big thing is that every time there's another up, it's a little higher, it's a little higher, it's a little higher, and the downs are a little lower, right? So it's not so much this here to here, it's this slow, gradual up and down to get there. Very similar to the Sherpa that takes you to the mountaintop, right? This is going to be the way we're going to go, and at times you're going to be like, oh wow, we're getting close. Well, we got to go back down now about 600 feet to go back up that next ridge, which will be another 1,000 to 1,500 feet. Like, sheesh, man, the altitude, the air is getting thin. This is not getting easier near the top, yet there's still plenty to knock you off
Well,
and knock you
you're
down.
asking, Trent, about what you do when you're down, right?
Yeah.
Sure, you could have thought that when it was you're 3 runs behind. Now you got 2 men on base, and do you just step up the plate and do that? No, you probably had that vision, and I found that running all the time. And I would speak to my boys about that and transfer that when I was coaching. Is that I'm not going to be on the backside of the track or at the finish line timing you. I'm going to be on the last curve, and I'm going to look in your eyes when you're coming around, and I'll know if you're going to finish. But the key to that is you have to vision that over and over and over. I'm coming around there, like throwing the baseball up, the last outs of the game and stuff like that. I felt that you know who the runners you got to beat, and you're coming around now. What are you going to do? So you have to have that vision in your mind on how to win, how to win. That's so important. And I remember many a times where it was a rough month or there was a lot of things going on. So I just said to myself, you know what? Why wouldn't I be going back to the days when I was a runner, and instead of waking up in the middle of the night like a lot of entrepreneurs do, worrying about what they're going to do in their cash flow, what they're going to do about sales or their inventory didn't come in or whatever. You have to know what those detours are going to be. And a lot of people don't like to do that, especially the younger generation. They automatically think somebody will take care of that. And some of them that I'm working with now, or the ones I worked with, they automatically could not understand. Even when I was the CEO of the company, they'd say, how did you know that? And I said, there's no crystal ball. You have to vision the bad side and the good side. I said, to be honest with you, there's more people that go out of business not knowing how to grow their company than they do scratching and going along, and putting things together, because they can manage that.
Yeah.
It's the ones who they're not ready because they've never gone through that. And I see that with runners, distance runners. My boys were intermediate runners, but you could tell sometime the different runners, they are real confident and they take off and they're way ahead, right? Well, that's the way it is with managing growth and entrepreneurship. They're way out there, but then they get a challenge or they get bumped or something happens. Now what? See, they're not ready for that journey. So that's what I think is, if you can visualize that and it's been in your head, you'll know what to do.
Yeah. One of the things I've always taught the youth and the kids is that, baseball's an easy one to kind of garner. You're on defense, and if the ball's hit to you, what do you do? What do you do in the situation? Always consider, what if the ball's hit to my left? What if the ball's hit to my right? What if it's hit in front? What if it hits in back? Like, where's going to be the cutoff? I mean, what do you do? Is this a double play ball? There's no one on first. Why are you throwing it to second baseman as the shortstop on a play with nobody on? Like, we haven't thought through that. And one of the things that we did a lot, and I played in 3 state championships for my sophomore, junior, senior year in baseball. And I recall many practices where we just have this thing called situations, and we'd all get in our position, and then we'd have one group running, and this was not live batting practice. The coach would hit situations, and based on what happened, he would go through and, this is the situation. There's 2 outs and it's the 9th inning and there's a guy on first and second. So instantly before he hits the ball, he's looking at the outfielders. Well, did you move in? Because you can't let him score. Like, you have to move in and close the gap. Like, it's a tie game. If he scores, the game is over. So if this is a base hit, and sometimes he let us go, left fielder still standing 10 feet from the warning track, hits a base hit right to him, and then he can't throw the guy out because there's 2 outs. And as soon as the ball hit, the runner takes off. And so he realizes you never had time. You never had time to make that throw. You can't stay that far back with 2 outs. So he was constantly educating us on thinking about, what's the situation? What do I do in this situation? And so you start envisioning, hey, what are all the situations that could possibly happen so that you're prepared? And I think that's positioning. I think that's positioning for growth, positioning for what's next. And I agree with you on the youth. I have to probably say it once a week in a conversation. Listen, no one's coming. No one's coming to help you. Like, it's up to you. You are responsible for your results. So if you think someone else is just going to come in and do the marketing job for you when it's your role and responsibility, they're not. They're not. You're going to have to do this. And it's challenging to me these days. It's challenging to think, and I don't know who they think's coming. I don't know.
It's funny. Baseball tends to be that team sport where a lot of those lessons learned, I've seen, really develop kids into something they were nothing. And it's funny because when we moved to Green Bay from the Madison area, they needed an extra team in this league because, well, it was like the Bad News Bears. Mark, you want to coach this team? You've coached before. Yeah. So here I am with all these.
You were Walter Matthau.
Right. But I knew I had the best pitcher and I knew I had the best athlete in Sean. but both the boys played on that little league team. And it's funny because we had some twins, and they'd be at the end of the bench, and they were just goofing around. Well, I made a statement was different than what the coaches believed in, and that was, do you play all the players? And I'd say, well, if the parents aren't there, then they may not play. and the reason I'm saying is I'm not going to be putting them in because I see them, and then they go to the mall to shop or something.
Yeah.
I said, I want them there. And if they don't, they may not play. And it's sad because, I mean, that was just to get them there.
Yeah.
But one of the mothers said at the end of I said, so what are your takeaways from your boys? I said, do you think they've improved or not? He says, Mark, I'm not even worried about if they're athletically that way. They just seem to be, it's that situation thing. They seem to be more aware on how to, timing wise, it's time to get up to bat. It's time to get your glove to go out in the field. And so they learn that at home. They were a little bit more time sensitive. They seem to care a little bit more about some things. So those little teeny situational things you were just talking about tend to groom. And if parents can sense that and see that, there's parents that put their kids in. It's no different than we used to think of going into the service because in the Army, the Navy, whatever, because they needed to have discipline. Well, there's also organizational things that happen. And I think all those things are important growing up. If you're a helicopter parent and you're just doing it for them to kill time, no, they need to have a coach who knows how to not just mentor or put the best teams to win the games, is what are they doing on some of those small skills?
Yeah.
And especially the desire for the team to come together. There were times when they didn't win the game, but they were just as fired up because maybe one of the guys on their team finally got a hit,
Yeah.
And all those things. It's camaraderie, building camaraderie, and that's really important.
I love it. Mark Burwell, thank you so much for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. You can find our show every Thursday morning live at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, and our Leadershipity YouTube channel live. And then, of course, our podcast drops every Friday morning on all the networks, Spotify, Apple. You can find it. So a special thanks today to Mark for joining us from lovely Wisconsin. Thank you, Mark, for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. For everyone else, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time as Winners Find a Way.
My pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks.